Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to share with you how to cut and sew a Victorian corset with bust caging. If this is something you like, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button. So let's dive right into today's video. Here on my pattern, I've gone ahead to mark out my basic measurements, which includes my shoulder to bust, shoulder to underbust, waist and top length. And for this pattern, we're making use of a bust dart. So I'll go ahead and mark my shoulder divided by 2 and I'll go down by 1 inch and I'll connect. The next step is to find your chest line. To find your chest line, which is also your armhole, is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So anything you have at that point, you go ahead to mark. And I will go ahead to also mark my shoulder at that point and I will connect. I'm going to measure what I have from that point to my bust line. This is just to make sure I have a straight line at that point. And after that, I'm just going to rule a straight line which will serve as my chest line or my armhole line. I'll go ahead and I will divide this into 2 by folding my tape this way, and I'll mark at that point, go in by half, and I'll go ahead to mark my bust circumference divided by 4, and I'll place my French curve, connect from that point down to the shoulder point this way. So after I'm done connecting, this is what my armhole curve looks like. I'll go ahead and use my marker and I'll go ahead to draw it out this way. The next step you're going to take is to go ahead to mark out your neckline, which will serve as a guide for this pattern. So I'm making use of the basic neckline, which is 3 by 3 inches, and I'm just going to go ahead to rule out this way and use my marker to mark it out. After you're done doing that, you want to go ahead to mark your nipple to nipple divided by 2. Now my nipple to nipple is 3.5 and I'm going to mark it all the way down to my pattern. And after I'm done doing this, I'm going to place my ruler and I'm going to draw a straight line connecting to all those points that I have made. Now you want to go ahead and divide your shoulder into 2 this way, and you're going to mark. Connect from your shoulder down to your chest line, and this is what I have. The next step is to mark your dart intake. Now I'll be marking 1.5 at both sides. For a plus size, go ahead and use 1.5 inches. So I'll mark that 1 inch at both sides, at the underbust and at the waist, and I'll go ahead to connect this way, and I'll place my ruler connecting from my waist down to my top length this way, and I'm going to connect. Next step is to connect from your bust down to your underbust this way, and you're going to repeat the same process at the other side of your pattern by connecting from the bust down to the underbust of your pattern. So after I'm done connecting, this is what I have, and I'm just going to go ahead to use my marker to mark out all the lines so that it's going to be very visible for you to see. So now you want to determine where your corset is going to stop. So I'm just going to mark 3 inches from my chest line. You can go ahead and use 2 inches also. I'll go ahead and draw out a line that will serve as a guide. So I'm going to be marking 0.75 at that point, and I'm going to connect. You don't want to have too much dart intake to avoid gaping or making it too curvy for you to join. You can as well use 0.5 inches at the upper part. So at this point, I'll mark my bust circumference, measure the dart intake, replace it, and add my sewing allowance. So I'm using ½ inch for the sewing allowance. For the underbust, I'll mark the underbust circumference, measure the dart intake, replace, and add my ½ inch for sewing allowance. So for this pattern, we're not making use of much sewing allowance. At the waist, I'm going to mark the waist circumference divided by 4. So if you want to snatch your waist, you are going to go ahead to do that. So my actual waist is 28. We are taking 2 inches from it and we are going to divide it. So after that, I'm just going to go ahead to mark the dart intake and mark my sewing allowance of 1/2 inch. At the waistline, I'll mark the hip circumference divided by 4 and I'll mark 1/2 inch for joining or sewing allowance. Now after doing this, I'm just going to place my curved rule, connect from the bust down to the under bust, and connect down to the waistline. From the waistline, I'm going to connect it all the way down to my top length this way. So this is what I have after I'm done marking, and I'm just going to go ahead to use my marker to draw out the lines so that it's going to be visible for you to see, and also at the other side I will do so. So at this point, if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. So I'm just going to divide my waist at this point and I'm going to mark a straight line. So you can also go ahead and mark a dart intake. With that way, you're going to snatch your waist the more. But I want to make this pattern very simple, so I won't be doing that. I'm just going to divide here into 2 because in a Victorian corset you have multiple dart and style lines. So now I'm going to go ahead to connect from this point down to my chest line this way. This is to draw out the neckline of this pattern. So feel free to draw any chest line at that point. So I'll connect to the armhole and blend it and make sure that those points are meeting. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my marker to outline it to make it more visible since that part is meeting. So after marking it out, this is what I have. And now we're going to go ahead to mark our bust dart. I'm using 1.5. Yours might be 1.52 inches or more. So remember that the front pattern is usually longer than the back pattern. So what I'm going to do is 22 inches, which is my length, minus the bust dart that I took out. I'll be having 20.5 inches for the back pattern. So I'm going to go up by 2.5 inches from the sides. So this is totally up to you. You can go ahead and use what you want. So I'll blend in my dart and I'll connect to the other part. So we have something like a slight basque, and this is how we're going to achieve that. I'm going to use my marker to draw this out. So we are done drafting out this pattern and I'm going to label it. So the next step is to go ahead to cut this out, and you're going to cut out your bust dart because you're going to go ahead to adjust it. Then you'll continue cutting out your pattern. So you want to slit that place, and I'm just going to cut out the parts that I'm working with, and after that I'll cut my bust dart this way and I'll blend it in. So if you place yours and it's not blending, just go ahead to blend it out by the side with your marker this way. So after I'm done doing that, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to cut my pattern. So at this point, if you find this tutorial very interesting and educative and you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and you can also follow me on my second YouTube channel, which is Draft by Maki. We also do drafting tutorials on that channel. So after I'm done cutting, this is what I have, and I'm just going to slit here into 2 this way. And after that, I'm done cutting out the front pattern. As easy as that. So if you have any question, please leave at the comment section. Moving over to the back pattern, we have marked out all our measurements. And for this pattern, we don't have an under bust for the back because we're making use of the bust dart. And if you notice, the distance between my bust and my waistline. So remember that we took out bust dart from our front pattern, so our front waistline is 17 inches. So but for the back we have 15.5 because we took out 1.5. So if you add 15.5, 1.5 to 15.5, you're going to get 17 inches. So for the length of the dress, just like I said, remember we took out that bust dart. So by the time you place it, that's 22 minus 1.5, you will have 20.5 inches. So this is what we are going to use for our waistline. We took out the bust dart, remember, and by the time you place your measurements back and take out that 1.5 inches from the total length, you'll be having 20.5. So if you have any question, please go ahead and leave it at the comment section. So now I'll mark my nipple to nipple just like we did at the front pattern, and I'm going to rule a straight line at that point. Now I'm going to be marking 1/2 inch at both sides of my pattern, and after that I'll go ahead to connect it upwards this way, and I'll connect down to the lower part on this point. So I'll just go ahead and use my marker to trace it out so that it's going to be more visible for you to see. After marking out this, the next step is just to go ahead and impute my body measurement. So at the bust, I'll mark the bust circumference divided by 4, add 1/2 inch for sewing allowance, and whatever I have at the chest line, I'll take it down to the bust. At the waistline, remember that we reduced our waistline. You're going to mark the waistline you used for the front, mark the dart, and mark 1/2 inch for sewing allowance. Now you're going to mark your hip circumference divided by 4 and add 1/2 inch. After you're done doing that, you want to go ahead to connect from your chest line, and from that point you're going to connect to the waist and take it down to the hip. So after I'm done doing that, I'm just going to go ahead to use my marker to mark it out. As simple as that. So now you want to divide your waist into 2 just like we did for the back. This is the easiest way to add a style line or divide your Victorian corset without adding too much dart on the pattern. So I'll mark this out. At the chest line, I'm going to go ahead to come down by 1/2 inch, and I'm going to place my curved rule and I'll connect it back to the chest line. This is to make sure that after sewing your dress, the center of the back will not be popping up. Now I'll just connect it back to the chest line, and after doing that, I'll be using 1.5 inches to create the lacing bar. So this 1.5 inches is not a standard. You can use more than that if you like. Now I'll just go ahead to connect it this way, and I'll make a dot to indicate the lacing bar and label my pattern. Now at this point, I'll go up by 2.5 inches, and at the center back I'll just go up by 2 inches. You can go ahead and just leave it that way for your center back. Connect from what you have to that point, or you can just make your own back shorter just this way. So I'll just go ahead and I will connect, and this is what I have for the back pattern. So I'm just going to cut it out. So with this, we have come to the end of today's video, and in our next video we'll be cutting and stitching up this pattern. If you find this tutorial very interesting and educative, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and also join us in our next video, just like I said, where we'll be cutting and stitching up this pattern. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you for always supporting my channel.